Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am here with King Joffrey, and we are ready to talk about Nikolas Motta versus Trey Ogden. Nikolas Motta is 30 years old, 15-5 as a pro, and he's given up 2 inches of height and 1.5 inches of reach to 34-year-old Ogden, who is 16-6. This is a fight between truly contrasting styles, certainly on paper. Nikolas Motta, he's got 15 wins, 9 via knockout, 4 via decision, 0 submissions. Trey Ogden's been finished 3 times, all 3 by submission, never been knocked out. Trey Ogden has 11 victories of his 16 wins via submission and 5 via decision, 0 knockouts. Nikolas Motta, of his 5 losses, 4 of them come via knockout, and his last 2 as well, which makes things worse for his chin. But that's what makes this a very interesting matchup. Nikolas Motta, much more of a striker and certainly more powerful than Trey Ogden. But Trey Ogden, he's not totally shit on his feet. He's just on the shit end of things, maybe in the UFC, but he's a competent enough striker. He was able to beat Daniel Zellhuber, which is a win that I think is going to get a lot better with age, because I think Daniel Zellhuber's got a good future. But he was shut down, neutralized by Ignacio Bahamondes. Just really flustered in that fight. And in the Jordan Levitt fight, I'll always go back to this, he gave away a round to those kicks, to the oblique kicks or whatever, the front kicks to the leg. And he was not able to make the adjustment, which I'm not saying I would be able to either, but he's definitely not the most sophisticated striker, Trey Ogden. But he is a guy that can strike. He hasn't produced a knockout yet. He did knock down T.J. Brown. I believe that was with a stiff jab, though, but he knocked him down and ended up getting the submission. Trey Ogden, he is a very good submission artist. 11 submission wins in his 16. Again, I mentioned he beat T.J. Brown via submission. Also beat J.J. Alkanovich with the arm triangle choke in round 2. And 5 decisions as well. He's shown he could be a grinder, even at the UFC level, against Daniel Zellhuber. His 6 losses, he's got 3 via submission, 3 via decision. He lost to Jordan Levitt and Ignacio Bahamondes, as I mentioned, by decision, and then some other asshole. And the 3 submission losses come to Thomas Gifford twice via guillotine in 1 minute, and Nick Brown, who beat him, I think that was an LFA main event, with a rear naked choke. Thomas Gifford, he's a guy who has a good guillotine. Definitely a bit of Cody McKenzie going on there. He was phased out of the UFC pretty quickly, but he made it to the UFC. The guy's not a shit fighter at all. And Nick Brown strangled him in round 1. Guy's a good submission grappler. But that's it. Trey Ogden, he's been a little vulnerable against good grapplers in round 1, but his chin is held strong. And he's proven to be a great grappler himself and a guy that you can trust to fight hard for 15 minutes. Nikolas Motta, I trust him to fight hard for 15 minutes, but I don't trust him to last 15 minutes in most fights. Not these days. He's got 5 losses, 4 of them via knockout, 1 via submission. He was guillotined himself in round 2. I don't know who he was against because I didn't write it down. But he lost 4 times via knockout. Twice earlier to Robert Hale and Antonio Carlos Ribeiro, and then twice in the UFC to Manuel Torres with the elbow and Jim Miller with that shovel hook or whatever, the leaping hook from Jim Miller. And they're both knockout losses. He is only 30 years old, but he's a guy who can't be trusted. His chin cannot be trusted, Nikolas Motta. Aside from maybe in this fight, because again, Trey Ogden doesn't really bring the deadly power, despite knocking down T.J. Brown, as I mentioned. But Nikolas Motta, he's a guy that is much more dangerous on the feet than Trey Ogden. I mean, he's got the 9 knockouts to prove it, but you could see when he fights, he just throws harder, and he's much more of a knockout threat than Trey Ogden is. Trey Ogden's striking is a means to an end, generally, and he's tough, and he's got some things going for him, but power isn't one of them. Although he's got size on Nikolas Motta, which might lend itself to power. Nikolas Motta, his best win is over Joe Solecki, round 3 knockout. although he won in the UFC as well over Cameron Van Camp. But he's a guy who I think might be given a potentially favorable matchup here just on that stylistic level. But he's a guy that's not going to be fighting in the UFC too long here. I think Trey Ogden, despite being 4 years older and a limited fighter himself, has a brighter future than Nikolas Motta. But in this matchup here, Nikolas Motta, I could see a path to victory here. It'd be him outstriking Trey Ogden via decision. I think that's his most likely path, but I'm going to side with Trey Ogden here. I think Trey Ogden throws enough to give himself a chance of getting his first knockout here, and I also think he's much better than Nikolas Motta on the ground. If he can make this a grappling match, and I'm not trusting that he can, but if he can, I think he definitely wins that fight. And then on the feet, I trust him much more health-wise, even though I don't think he's got the power to really cash in on Nikolas Motta's poor health. And in a rangy kickboxing battle, while I expect him to be behind, I know he can bring the pressure and utilize his height and reach with some good fundamental striking against Nikolas Motta. He's at least going to be in the striking match. And again, I trust his health overall much more. So at the very least, he's going to keep himself in the striking match. So I'm picking Trey Ogden, money line plus 115. That's good enough for me to throw a little sprinkle on it, attach it to a parlay, but my heart's not totally into it. I just trust a lot more about him as a fighter, but I do see the path to victory for Nikolas Motta in winning a decision with power. As I say, power wins decisions. Not often, but it can definitely be the difference maker, and this is a case where it can be for Nikolas Motta. Still, I'm going against him. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.